None of the Apostolic Fathers explicitly held to what we would today recognize full preterism, the belief that all prophecies in the New Testament, including the second coming of Christ, were fulfilled in the events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. The Apostolic Fathers generally believed that the destruction of Jerusalem fulfilled Jesus' prophecies regarding the temple, but they still anticipated a future, physical second coming of Christ and the final judgment. Here's how some key Apostolic Fathers viewed these events. Clement of Rome, in his first epistle to the Corinthians, Clement mentions the resurrection and the return of Christ, speaking of it as a future hope. He did not claim that the second coming had already occurred in 70 AD. In his letters, Ignatius often spoke about the future coming of Christ. He emphasized the importance of remaining faithful in anticipation of Jesus' return. His writings suggest an expectation of a future, literal second coming, not something already fulfilled in the destruction of the temple. Polycarp of Smyrna, in his letter to the Philippians, Polycarp also speaks of the resurrection and future judgment. He, like the others, saw these events as still to come, not having already occurred in 70 AD. The Didache refers to a future coming of Christ and includes warnings to be watchful for that day, indicating that the community who preserved this document expected Jesus to return after the destruction of the temple. The Epistle of Barnabas, while not as theologically detailed on the second coming as other writings, Barnabas also spoke of eschatological events as future occurrences reflecting a hope in Christ's return. The early church fathers, including the Apostolic Fathers, distinguished between the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the future second coming of Christ. For them, the destruction of the temple was part of the unfolding of God's plan, but did not mark the end of all eschatological events. They believed that the second coming, the resurrection of the dead, and the final judgment were still future events. In contrast, preterism, particularly full preterism, teaches that all prophecy, including the second coming, resurrection, and final judgment, was fulfilled by 70 AD. This interpretation did not exist among the Apostolic Fathers, who maintained a more futurist view of key eschatological events. In conclusion, the Apostolic Fathers anticipated a future second coming of Christ and a final judgment, marking them as non-preterist in their eschatology. In my upcoming video, I will be presenting evidence as to how the word genia in Koine Greek, translated as generation, was used by contemporaries of the Gospel writers. This will clearly demonstrate that genia, generation, was often used to refer to more than a temporal sense of 40 years. Also, I'll clearly demonstrate that Jesus was addressing two separate issues concerning the Great Tribulation as found in Matthew 24, verse 29, which is a distinct event of tribulation in Matthew 24, verse 21.